When I was a kid, I was pretty moody. I wasn't necessarily the easiest child to raise for my family. So, growing up, I had a lot of difficulties that I had to go through. Probably not as bad as a lot of people, but we all have different kinds of pain that we experience. And from a very young age, I seem to have the capacity to tell and determine when someone was in a difficult state or a bad mood, and I really wanted to understand that. That's one of the reasons why I ended up going to school, getting a degree in psychology and philosophy, because I wanted to understand these things. But more than that, like most people who get degrees in those sorts of things, why do you really do that? Because you want to understand yourself. And oftentimes, why do you want to understand yourself? But because there's a sense of confusion or a sense of unknowing there. In the same way that when a person typically gets involved in spiritual practices, why do they do that? Because most of the time, they're in a state of pain. It's very rare that a person wakes up one day and says, I just love God so much, it's all I'm going to do is meditate and pray and lock myself away into that. It's rare that that occurs. Sometimes I'm sure it does. But most of us, the reason we get into meditation and spirituality is because there's something going on in our life that we don't feel is right. We feel a little off. We feel a little alienated. We've been abused. We've been tortured. We've had pain. We've put ourselves in difficult situations, and we'd like to be free of it. And how do I know that this is true? Well, think about it. If everything you had, you were provided for, if your parents were as exactly loving as you would want them to be, if all of your friends thought you were the greatest thing since sliced bread, if you were able to find your dream job to be of complete and utter perfect service to the world, if all this worked out well for you, if you never got sick, you never got a cold, no one ever died, would you really even ever think about God? Honestly. Would you ever even think about, what can I do to make myself better? No, because everything would be just great. So, the point of this video, this idea of working through past pain, I feel it's probably very relevant to anyone on any spiritual path. Because most people get on their path. They want to meditate because they want to make themselves better, or they want to not be bothered by the stresses around them, or they want to understand the bigger picture. So even if there is pain and suffering and difficulty, they'll know why. And if they know why, well, great. Then it makes sense. They don't have to think about it anymore. And oftentimes, that's what religion and spirituality does. It doesn't necessarily give you the real reason why something happens, but it fills in the blank. And once you get the blank filled in, you say, oh, okay. Same way with astrology. As you know, many of you know I'm an astrologer. Half the time, when I'm talking to someone, even if I want to share with them, this is how you can work with this is how you can get beyond it, the moment I say, it's because the north node of the moon and Mars are doing this, the person takes a deep breath, sighs, and says, well, great, I'm glad it's just that. And they move on. They feel fine. So, us humans, we have this tendency to, if there's a problem, we don't understand it, then we're scared. We need a reason. We get that reason. We see that there's a reason for the suffering, a reason for the pain. Okay, great. This is a test of God. Now I can handle it. Move on. But those are just reasons. Those are just ideas that humans make up. Anything that's thought-based is going to be based on something that a human thought up. It's just the way it goes. But past pain isn't necessarily something that you can just ignore or get rid of. Someone recently sent me an email thanking me for the fact that I talk about how before you even get on a spiritual path, it's really advisable that you have worked through a lot of your idiosyncrasies, your traumas, your difficulties. It's advisable that you're in a pretty good place in life, that things are pretty stable. That's why traditionally people didn't run off into the woods until they've had a family, they work through all their issues, they know that they've got kids and grandkids that can bring them food whenever they need it, and they can just focus on their meditation practice. So it is very important to realize that attending to past pain, trauma, abuse, weird thoughts you have in your head, whatever it might be, is very important before seriously undertaking a spiritual path. Because the more screwy you are up here, and I'm not meaning that in any judgmental fashion, because we're all a little screwy. One thing Yogananda said, or I heard that he said, was that we're all a little crazy, but we tend to hang out with people that are crazy like we are, so we don't know. But the more screwy we are up here, the more pain we have, the more we're meditating or practicing to get away from something, the less likely we're going to actually benefit from meditation as an enlightening, awakening realization path. But on the other side of that, a lot of people treat meditation and spiritual processes as though they are healing things. And in and of themselves, they are not meant to be healing things. Yes, meditation can help you calm your mind and your nervous system so that you can maybe process things a little bit easier. But meditation and contemplation were for the sake of understanding higher principles, higher realities, not to work through the crap. All right? Massage will help you work through crap. Doctors can help you work through crap. Psychologists, people trained in healing arts, can help bring awareness to something, give you tools to help you learn and grow from that. And we have to realize that we don't want to make our spiritual practice into a hobby of transformation, because then we're always needing to transform in order to feel alive. We don't want to make a spiritual practice into a hobby of healing, where what's the next lesson we have to learn? What's the next thing we have to heal? Because this world of karma is endless. So the more you're looking for something to heal, more than likely, the more you're going to find it. So we have to ride this fine line between, okay, I had this trauma, it's seriously impeding my capacity to function in the world. Whenever I sit down to meditate, it's always there. I have to deal with that. We have to ride that fine line of attending to these things, which we certainly do have to deal with, versus, okay, I've dealt with all my childhood issues. Now, what else can I dig into my past lives, or whatever it might be, or what's the global consciousness that I have to work through? So you want to avoid turning healing of past pain into a hobby, but you also want to realize, and this is something that I think a lot of spiritual practices, teachers don't talk about, and maybe it's because they assume that you've already worked through it, but that's kind of an unrealistic assumption, that if you have grief, if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, if you have consistent anxiety, consistent depression, all of that is going to get in the way of your capacity to meditate well. Because instead of being able to meditate well, all you're going to be doing is trying to fend off these things which are disturbing your consciousness. And that's not effective practice. So we have to go into them. We have to honor them. We have to talk to someone. And we have to realize that nothing will ever be perfect. Meaning there will be some scars and some traumas and some grief that will never heal. Every time you think about the particular situation, maybe you will cry. Maybe your breathing will become rapid. But it's the fact that you think that there's something you could do to make it all better that's going to keep you in a loop of delusion. Because part of being in this world, being human, is to realize that suffering is just part of life. Remember, I'm not a Buddhist, but if I recall correctly, the first noble truth is what? Life is suffering. Make peace with that. You're going to start out on a very intelligent footing in the world. You're not going to expect it to be different. Similarly, that doesn't mean that life is all suffering. We have a tendency to be an extreme, to go to extremes, where we'll have beauty and we'll say, oh yes, but there's all this difficulty and sadness and grief and war too. Yeah, well, if you're in a war zone, be in the war zone and deal with it. If you're not, and you're able to just sit on your couch and meditate and stare at the wall and enjoy your plants, don't worry about the war zone. Okay? If you are in a position where you can do something about pain, do it. But don't go out looking for it. The best approach I have found to prepare someone for dealing with past pain in an authentic way, I consider, without getting hung up on it, without defining one's life through it, and then to move beyond it, is a book called The Presence Process by Michael Brown. Many of you maybe have heard me talk about this. Because it's not getting you to escape from anything. It's getting you to honor and acknowledge and integrate what happened, the reality of the situation. And the more that you're able to embrace the reality of things, without trying to sugarcoat it, without saying, why would God do this? Well, who knows? You don't know. No one knows. God is a mystery. But no, I'm not going to say there is a reason. Because again, by saying there is a reason, then you're going to say, great, I can move on. Maybe there is no reason. Can you make peace with that? Remember, divine consciousness, God is everything. It's the pain, it's the suffering, it's the joy, it's the elation, it's everything. And to say, I will love God in this way, but not when he comes as grief, is to say, I'm dividing my consciousness. You say you want to be whole, you want to be enlightened, you want to be experience oneness consciousness. Well, to experience oneness consciousness, you have to be one with everything. The dirt, the mud. You have to be conscious, one with the sun, the birds flying through the sky, the person's getting brutalized, the perpetrator, the person who's saving them. You have to be one with everything. And that's where we get all tripped up and we can't quite make those kinds of breakthroughs, because usually people take that to mean, I can do anything I want. And that's not at all what we're saying here. We're just needing to realize that there is a power, an evolutionary trend, a mystery that might act in ways that we cannot perceive, we cannot understand, and that we will experience pain. But that does not mean that we define ourselves through pain. That sometimes grief may come to us, and if we have to cry for 6 months straight about the loss of a loved one, that's just part of the process. And it's not dishonoring them, it's not dishonoring God by acknowledging that. So dealing with past pain, it has to be done, but not as a hobby, not as going out searching for it, but being true to it in the moment. And realizing if it's getting in the way of your practice, you might need to stop your practice and go talk to someone to work these things through. It might be an extremely painful process. You might have to do and say things and acknowledge things that occurred to you that you would much rather sweep under the rug and throw in a room behind a safe and lock it all away and cast it in iron and hope it never comes out again. But that's part of what needs to be done oftentimes. Now, as I was thinking about making this video, I actually went back home to my hometown, and I decided to contemplate this and think about, when I was a young child, a teenager, what did I do? I'd always been interested in the occult and alternative ways of knowing at a very young age, at least 12 or 13 at minimum. And I can remember one particular writer that I was reading at the time. Luckily, he got into Eastern traditions later on in his writing career, which led me to Eastern traditions. One of the things he said was, you have to ask to have all of your karma given to you right now, all at once, whatever it is, so that you can move on. And I remember being a teenager and creating a little ritual for myself and going off into the woods, this particular place where I always enjoyed going to either bring my guitar, just sit and stare at the water. It was this stone structure, and I have no idea what it was for. But it was old, it was broken down, no one ever came there. Remember, I did this little ritual for myself and asked, give me all of my karma right now so I can just move on and not have to deal with this stuff anymore. So I don't know if my interesting high school years was the result of that particular intention. But that was something that I did. Not because I wanted to always be dwelling on the negativity, whether it came from past lifetimes or my own choices or the people around me, but because I wanted to face it. It was a silly idea, I think, but I wanted to face it. I took walks down these railroad tracks that we lived near. I always loved walking alone on the railroad tracks. There was a river by it. And I would spend time just enjoying nature, just being in the water, watching the sun reflecting off the water, watching the fish. There was something meditative about that whole experience for me that allowed me to get away from my inner turmoil that I would experience in my normal everyday life. So we don't want to say that you can't do any kind of retreat or spiritual practice if you haven't dealt with all of your problems. That's not it at all. Because sometimes it does help to get distance, to go for that walk by yourself, down railroad tracks. I don't think that's legal, actually, but down railroad tracks, through the woods, going for a swim by yourself, and just sitting and being with nature and just breathing. Sometimes you need that distance to get insights about how to deal with certain things. So there's nothing wrong with seeking spiritual solitude and refuge from time to time to kind of get your bearing. It can be very helpful for you. But what you find is that the more that you work with the difficulties that you've not healed, or the pain that you've not acknowledged, the more that you quit trying to avoid it and you embrace it. And when anger comes, you just embrace the anger. When depression or sadness comes, you just do what you need to do to let the body feel it and let it move through you as an aspect of consciousness. Then, when you're able to go on retreats or take meditation for yourself, or go walk through the woods, or like I used to do, go on the railroad tracks, or spend time in the water and the river, then your mind is so clear and free that you understand very easily and deeply and completely what the mystics say about embracing a oneness consciousness, or your all. It can both be A-L-L, your all, or A-W-E, the all, the magnificence of it. And the mind stops. And if something comes up, it's okay. It's just part of your consciousness. And you're able to witness the birth, the death, the grief, the joy, the sorrow, the love, the beauty, the ugliness, the old age, the youthfulness of everything as part of one infinite consciousness. You're not trying to get away from anything anymore. So there may be a distinct period of time where you become aware of things you have to work with. And this can occur even as you advance in your practice. It's been a while since I've taught the Yoga Sutras. Maybe I need to do another class on that here soon. But there's a particular sutra thread towards the end of the text where it says, and sometimes distractions will still percolate up and problems will still reveal themselves because they're subliminal influences that you have not become aware of yet. So you can be in pristine states of consciousness in your daily activities and meditation. And every now and then something will just come out of nowhere. You're like, what the hell is that? And it's because there was just something in that vast ocean of your consciousness which has not been integrated yet. And when nothing has been integrated, it's much easier to kind of bump into the problems in your consciousness. It seems like they're everywhere. But the clearer your consciousness becomes, or the more integrated it becomes, it's like there's more space between the difficult points. So you might not hit them as often, but when you do, they become a little more intense because you've been in a period of clarity and tranquility for such a time. So you have to remember that even advanced meditators, even advanced yogis, in their inner work, they will come upon things. Things will happen within their life. And if they're aiming to be mature, holistic beings, they're not just going to get rid of it. They're going to look at it. They're going to honor it as an aspect of themselves, and they're going to try to find a way to integrate it. And if that means just accepting that that is a pain, and that pain exists in life, it will be that. If it's reframing it somehow, they will do that. If it's giving it up to their idea of God, divine consciousness, they will do that. It reminds me of a story I heard one time, again, about Yogananda, where one of his disciples' mothers had died. I think it was the mother. And the woman wasn't crying. She was going through the whole yogic thing of, well, everything is God, and therefore death is nothing, and so I'm only a real yogi if I don't cry and act like I actually feel pain. And Yogananda started crying. And she said, why are you crying? And he said, well, someone has to cry for your mother. So, keep in mind that we have demonized feeling, well, not all of us, not all of you, but many people on the disciplined yogic path have demonized the energy of life moving through you. And it's not meant to be that way. Consciousness is always moving, always evolving, always changing. And if we can honor the storm clouds as well as the sunny days, then we're going to see the real beauty of a unified consciousness. So keep this in mind as you move forward on your path.